Welcome to Future Talk. On today's program, we're going to discuss intelligent machines. What can they do? What will they be able to do in the future? What are the benefits and risks of using such machines? And what can they teach us about ourselves? My guest is Steve Omohundro, who's worked in the field of artificial intelligence for many years as a scientist, a professor, an author, and an entrepreneur. He recently founded Self-Aware Systems, a think tank dedicated to bringing positive human values to intelligent technologies. Steve, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you. Happy to be here.
Good to have you today. Steve, what do you think is the most important trend in artificial intelligence today?
Well, I think there are a lot of intellectual developments that are happening that are very exciting, but the most exciting thing, I think, is that all of the major companies seem to be investing heavily in this area. IBM just announced they're investing $1 billion in Watson, which is their AI system. Siri, which Apple has, is sort of moving into a more and more intelligent way of being. And Google has been investing a lot. They just bought 8 robot companies. So I think there's a lot of action in this area right now. And so the next few years should be very interesting.
Now, where are we going to really see all this in our lives?
Well, already having phones that you can talk to. Right now, they don't understand us very well, but as the years progress, you can expect these systems to get better and better at understanding. And then robots are really big. The company that builds the Apple iPhone is called Foxconn in China, and they have a manufacturing plant, and they've decided that even in China, that labor is too expensive. They're buying 1 million robots to put together iPhones and other devices like that. And so I think we should see a major shift in manufacturing over the next decade or so.
What are some of the problems that have to be solved to produce artificial intelligence? Is there anything you have to figure out or have insight into to make it work?
Well, what's interesting, the original term artificial intelligence was invented around 1960, and scientists at that time thought, it'll be about 5 years or so before we have machines which are as smart as people. They grossly underestimated how challenging it was, and interestingly, the things that are easy for us, like distinguishing a dog from a cat, turned out to be really hard for these AI systems, where stuff that's very hard for us, like playing a good game of chess, turns out to be pretty easy for these systems. And so our sense of what's easy and what's hard turns out to be different than we thought it was. And so common sense knowledge and having semantics and understanding of how the world works, that's been sort of the biggest hurdle that these systems haven't yet overcome.
And putting intelligence into machines, does that necessarily force us to develop greater insight into our own intelligence and our own thought process?
Well, I think that's going to be the most exciting and interesting aspect of these changes over the next few decades, is that as we begin to build intelligent systems, they're going to serve as a kind of mirror to us. In addition to sort of helping us do things that we couldn't do before, or doing things cheaper, like manufacturing and so on, it's going to be a whole new era where we can begin to explore what is the nature of thought? What is the nature of consciousness? What are human values? As we build these systems, we're going to build them to reflect the things that we most want in the world. And so I think it's going to sort of focus our attention on that in a way that's never happened in history before.
Now, do you see artificial intelligence as a force just for good, or is there a downside also? Might it come back and bite us somehow?
Well, so one of the areas that's getting a lot of funding is, of course, the military. The military has tremendous need for very powerful force and for making decisions in a smart way. Military robots, maybe they have good and bad consequences.
Smart bombs.
Smart bombs. Drones are a very popular thing right now. So drones are going to get smarter and smarter. Anti-drones, right? The opponents aren't going to sit there and allow drones to just drop bombs on you. They're going to be, so it's going to be arms races in a variety of areas. And that could be dangerous. One thing I've thought a lot about is unintended consequences, that we build these systems, we give them goals that we think are going to be good, but in fact they end up doing things that we didn't expect. And I think that's the biggest worry that I have, and where I think there's a lot of scientific insight that's needed to really make sure that the choices we make actually lead to a good outcome.
One of the issues might be the privacy issue, because with social networking nowadays, pretty much everything you do in your life can be tracked. So we all know more about each other, which might be considered a good thing, but there's a downside as well. Maybe you don't want the world to know everything you're doing in your life.
Yeah, a few years back, David Brin wrote a wonderful book called The Transparent Society, in which he argued, and rightfully so, I think, that the cost of cameras is getting cheaper and cheaper. Every cell phone now has a camera, so cameras are only like $1 to manufacture, and they're getting smaller and smaller. And once you have, say, drones with cameras on them flying all over the place, privacy as we have known it is probably likely to go away. And his point was that when we think about Big Brother, we often think of surveillance, sort of, the government officials or the police sort of watching everybody and keeping track of people so that they can sort of catch innocent people. He argues that what will really happen most likely is surveillance. So sur is the French word for over, sous is the French word for under, in which all of us will have our own little phone cameras, and with Google Glass and similar wearable technologies, most people will begin to be recording every aspect of their lives. And so we'll be watching what government officials do, what police officers do, what the agents of the state. And so it'd be more of a balanced thing, he would argue.
Now, could that be a problem? Because most people have contradictions in their lives. Most people have things that they don't necessarily want to bring to the light of day. And if all of a sudden your life is being observed, that could create enormous stress, which could manifest itself in rather unpleasant ways.
Yeah, and so I think that one of the big changes that the surveillance issue and the AI issue is going to bring about is we're going to have to pass laws that we actually want enforced. Like today, most people speed at times on the freeway, and most of the time you don't get caught because there's only, patrol cars every so often. It won't be very long before there'll be cameras all along every highway, and if, as a society, we decide to, we could make every speeding infraction be detected and a ticket mailed to you immediately. And so, do we want that? And so I think the whole AI area is going to cause us to rethink exactly what kinds of laws do we want and what behaviors do we want to encourage and discourage.
Well, you said something earlier about human values. So what sort of human values are we talking about here? Can you give an example of a human value that we're concerned about?
Well, I think the basic struggle is the one between competition and cooperation. And humanity for ages has had this battle. If you look at all the moral systems of every religion and every moral code, it's all about how much do you do for yourself versus how much do you do for the greater good of the society that you belong to. And it's a struggle that I think each person has within themselves. And these technologies will allow individuals to have power way beyond what they do today. I mean, already we see a huge divide between, say, the wealthy and the poor, and that divide is getting bigger and bigger. These systems are likely to make that
Well,
bigger.
can you do both? Because humanity has always been divided into multiple groups, and so you cooperate with the people in your group against the people in the competing groups.
Yeah, that has been the nature in a lot of different societies. The whole world, though, is becoming wired. A lot of people are talking about the global brain, the sense in which the internet is hooking up everybody on the planet. And more people, I think, are beginning to identify themselves not with their particular country or their particular ethnic group, but rather with the whole of humanity. And exactly how that plays out, of course, there are going to be dissenting groups, I think is going to be very interesting.
Well, there are many different worldviews, and some of them are quite incompatible with each other. And a lot of people seem to be willing to fight to make sure that their worldview is the one that prevails. And technology doesn't seem to have changed that any. That's still very present.
Yeah, somebody has the notion of the filter bubble, which is when you do a search on the internet, the search engines are modeling. What are you interested in? What things do you click on? And so they're using simple AI techniques to build a model of you and to show you more of what things that you'll like. And this, on the one hand, is good. It means that more of the things that come up for you are things that you care about. On the other hand, it distorts your view of reality. So you might think that, for instance, the Wikipedia is like an unbiased source of what the consensus of humanity thinks. There's the Conservapedia, which presents the conservative worldview, looks just like the Wikipedia, and if that's your philosophy, maybe you'll go there, and you'll see an entirely different view of different questions. And so it's possible that the internet could fragment into totally different conceptual systems, and I think we're beginning to see that to some extent today.